The fact that it can only live in one mode and one presentation was excruciating for me.
Keith Urban, who is currently 57 years old, continues to project the image of a prosperous country music artist on the global scene. This is your name, it's ideal. Completely annoy everyone around you by not understanding the words. Behind a celebrity's public persona is a history ripped apart by addiction, loss, domestic abuse, and wounds that never fully go away. I have an allergy to it. The only distinction is that I would be drinking if I wasn't allergic to it. All right. However, I break out in handcuffs. Viewers are about to witness not only the truth behind the moniker Keith Urban, but also the tale of a tortuous, dark journey that has only now come to light and is full of disturbing disclosures. On October 26, 1967, Keith Urban was born in Whangarei, New Zealand. At the age of 2, Keith, the youngest of 2 children, relocated to Queensland, Australia, along with his parents and older brother. The Urban family operated a convenience store in the Brisbane suburb of Caboolture and belonged to the middle class. Years of unrest lay beneath that placid exterior, as Keith Urban would subsequently describe numerous times in the global press. Robert Urban, his father, had a severe alcohol addiction and signs of losing control. He's just a badass. He always looked fantastic and smelled good. Awesome as heck. He was addicted, though. Keith Urban acknowledged that my dad was an alcoholic in an interview with The Boot. You are aware that it had a disturbed upbringing. Additionally, he disclosed that the persistent feelings of insecurity and pain from his early years persisted throughout his personal development. You know, I wish he had looked at me like that. A child psychologist would probably say it was my fault. From an early age, Keith Urban developed a tendency to withdraw into himself due to psychological aggression and pressure from his family. His only source of stability during the most trying times of his early years was music. At the age of 6, Keith started playing the guitar under the strong influence of his father, a guy who was both a source of scars that were difficult to repair and an inspiration to artists. Every day I see a little more of my father in me, Urban once underlined, expressing the complicated mixture of pride and anguish over his father's influence on his life. Reputable publications like Rolling Stone have said that Keith Urban's father was violent and nasty, fostering a tense, silent, tearful, and perpetually lonely atmosphere. Keith Urban eventually had to acknowledge that his early years had been marred by unsaid suffering. That testifies to the denial of the young, wounded youngster he admitted in one interview. This emotional evasion and denial persisted for years until he was finally able to confront his own past as an adult. Despite coming from a dysfunctional family, Keith Urban never stopped looking for chances to show off his musical skills. He took first place at Australia's biggest country music competition, the Tamworth Country Music Festival, in 1983. At the age of 6, Keith began his professional acting career the same year when he made his television debut on Reg Lindsay's Country Farmhouse. Urban formally joined the music industry in 1990 after landing his first recording deal. Early on in his career, Keith had to face disappointment and the possibility of losing his passion after his band, The Ranch, flopped in the marketplace. The Australian immediately took notice of Keith Urban as a young, bright star. In actuality, he was still burdened by his family and loneliness. Keith Urban was raised in unfavorable conditions, but they strengthened his fortitude and capacity to bounce back from setbacks. The early years turned into a protracted process of tenacity, fortitude, and reality-based learning. Urban realized that the only way he could actually take charge of his future was to conquer himself. A powerful personality was shaped by his father's scars, the strain from his family history, and the lingering sense of loneliness. Someone who can bounce back from setbacks and keep looking for fresh chances. Keith Urban left Caboolture with a recollection of a difficult upbringing and a strong determination to succeed, aiming for Nashville, the city of enormous hopes and the location of much more difficult obstacles. The darkness and the American dream. Keith Urban formally moved to Nashville, USA from Australia in 1992 in order to start over in his career. Keith had to live in a low-income area and share a room with a cocaine addict throughout his early years, which presented a number of unrelenting obstacles. Keith Urban was initially exposed to and progressively became enmeshed in the temptations of alcohol and drugs under these conditions. Keith talked about this difficult time in an interview with Vocal Media, explaining how he was turned down more than 10 times until landing a deal with Capitol Records in 1999. Keith's addiction spiraled deeper and harder to control as a result of the strain of earning a living and his recurrent failures. His physical and mental health drastically deteriorated throughout this time. Keith Urban took cocaine and alcohol virtually constantly starting in the early 1990s, according to gathered documents. He was hospitalized twice, first at the Betty Ford Center in California in 2006 and once at Cumberland Heights in Nashville in 1998. Keith had to go to rehab 3 times in all, with each treatment lasting 6 to 9 months. In an open assessment of today, Keith Urban acknowledged that his 2006 relapse had a disastrous effect on him and his family, which ultimately led to the breakdown of his new marriage. He was also frank in his speech. "I didn't realize I was an alcoholic for a long time. Unlike my dad, I didn't drink." Music continued to be Keith Urban's most important lifeline throughout this period, assisting him in facing reality. His continuous struggle with inner darkness was reflected in a number of songs with intensely intimate and psychological themes, such as "You're Not My God" 2002 and "Nobody Drinks Alone" 2004. According to Keith, music was always my escape and my means of continuing on. While he was still battling temptation, his perseverance in creating and performing songs helped him maintain some of his integrity and clarity during the crisis. In retrospect, Keith Urban's American career was by no means a run of unbroken hits. Deep disappointment, psychological wounds, and the ongoing danger of losing oneself were the price paid for each new opportunity. Keith Urban had several moments of feeling like giving up since his efforts seemed to be constantly hindered by old wounds. Nevertheless, he managed to cling to hope because of his audience, his relationship to music, and his tenuous confidence in a different tomorrow. Holding on to family love and faith while still not totally recovered became the real battle as the biggest temptations eventually subsided. Then, Urban was a new chapter ahead of Keith with even more difficult decisions to make as loss and love merged, laying the groundwork for each significant event in his life that will come after. Fissures that haven't healed. Keith Urban's encounter with Nicole Kidman at the Gala USA Gala in Los Angeles in January 2005 marked a significant turning point in his life. The two immediately connected deeply and started a covert relationship while being closely watched by the media. Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman became engaged just 5 months later, and on June 25, 2006, they had a small wedding in Sydney. However, their bliss was put to the test right away. Keith Urban started to exhibit symptoms of a relapse into cocaine and alcohol use after the honeymoon. Nicole Kidman, who refused to allow the issue to get out of hand, observed her husband's strange shifts, mood swings, sleeplessness, and increasing estrangement from the family. Keith Urban and close pals claim that Nicole discreetly contacted a California rehabilitation professional. In October 2006, they proactively planned an intervention. Despite Keith Urban's strong reaction and denial of the issue, Nicole, her family, and close friends convinced him to attend the Betty Ford Center that very evening. Nicole's tenacity and steadfast assistance turned out to be pivotal. In order to help Keith understand the importance of genuine family ties, she put her entire film career on hold, relocated near the treatment facility, wrote personal letters, supplied daily encouragement, and physically took her own daughter to visit him. In an interview with People following 3 months of treatment, Keith Urban acknowledged that true love is about sticking with each other through difficult times as well as being together when things are easy. Nicole referred to Keith as a rock of a husband in an interview with Pop Sugar, highlighting the value of integrity, self-control, and friendship in maintaining happiness and promoting psychological healing. Sunday Rose, Keith and Nicole's first daughter, was born in 2008. Shortly after those difficulties, Faith Margaret was born via surrogacy in 2010. Keith once said, I love having girls," expressing his satisfaction. They have never before attended a concert. On Father's Day in 2025, both daughters made their stage debut with their father, providing the tiny family with a unique and endearing photo. In addition to being a unique occasion for Keith Urban, it also served as evidence of their perseverance in overcoming hardship and maintaining their family's unity. Keith Urban continued to experience severe personal losses following a long period of physical and mental difficulties. Keith's father died from cancer in 2015. There was a huge hole left by the man who had plagued his early years leaving. "I am so deeply grateful that Dad is no longer suffering," Keith remarked at the funeral. Keith and the rest of the crew were shocked when his tour manager, Randy Baja Fletcher, passed away in an accident shortly before a gig in 2021. His mother-in-law, Janelle Kidman, also died in 2024, causing the family to experience what Keith Urban called a deep state of grief. With every loss, Keith Urban had to face himself, go back on the past, and look for ways to get better. His sole means of overcoming his sadness was music. His path of emotional release is embodied in the song Break the Chain, which also conveys the message of ending generational grief cycles. According to Keith Urban, grief comes in waves. Following such significant disruptions, he made the decision to prioritize his family, maintain a healthy lifestyle, cut back on risky hobbies, and learn to value each time spent with his wife and kids. Putting aside his internal conflicts, Keith Urban is currently dealing with a completely different kind of strain as a result of a surge of untrue allegations that are forcing him to engage in a new conflict between social media and reality. Entering 2023, the truth behind the crises. As rumors of Keith Urban's death began to circulate alarmingly on social media, he suddenly became the focus of attention. Millions of fans around the world were terrified when fake messages saying Keith Urban had died kept popping up on Facebook, Twitter, and even pages posing as fact-checking groups. Snopes claims that the term Keith Urban dead quickly rose to the top of the search engine results page. Causing mayhem in country music communities and fan pages, Keith Urban and his family decided to keep quiet in the face of this flood of untrue information. His management and public relations team promptly refuted all of the reports, stating that he was still in good condition and actively pursuing a career in music. Additionally, Snopes completely disproved the false information, declaring that the singer's death in December 2023 was a fabrication. However, these rumors had a profound psychological impact, particularly on Keith Urban's loved ones, who had already experienced actual family tragedies and were now subject to public pressure and concern for their relative. Keith Urban had previously been involved in untrue rumors, but in 2023, the level of sophistication and risk of these fabrications peaked. Keith Urban stated in one statement that this circumstance did not only affect him but also represented a larger reality that many modern-day superstars had to deal with. In addition to causing him personal distress, death rumors also interfered with his artistic and performance endeavors, requiring Keith to have the ability to adjust and remain resilient in the face of covert social media attacks. Keith Urban's response was frequently questioned by the public, but instead of becoming involved in arguments, he concentrated on his profession and shielded his family and himself from the damaging effects of fake news. After years of conquering obstacles in real life, Keith was able to demonstrate his inner strength and preserve his privacy with this decision. The real tragedy Keith Urban experienced was not the vile gossip or false articles, but rather the intensified grief and sorrow that were hidden from view. When ancient wounds remained unhealed, social media's repeated declarations of death added significant psychological strain, forcing Keith Urban to once more heal himself via creative music and unwavering dedication to his chosen career. Following these disruptions, Keith Urban limited his public appearances, spent more time with his family, and completely focused on music projects. He remained unfazed by the flood of bogus information. height. Instead, it served as motivation for him to continually assert his worth in every musical composition and stage show. Returning to the racetrack, Keith Urban's career saw a significant sea change in 2024 when his 12-track album, High, was released. With 17,000 copies sold in its first week in the United States, the album shot to number 6 on the album sales list, 38 on the Billboard 200, and into the top 10 of the country charts. When High was recognized as the best-selling Australian country album, its commercial success only increased. At the Golden Guitar Awards in 2025, these numbers confirm Keith Urban's position in the global music market and show his significant influence after over 30 years in the business. Keith Urban started the High in a live tour in 2025, playing about 40 performances nonstop from North America to Australia, in addition to the new album. The Budweiser Stage in Toronto, the Rogers Arena in Vancouver, and the Intuit Dome in Los Angeles were all often sold out. However, Keith also made the decision to perform on smaller stages like Toronto's Horseshoe Tavern in order to be in direct contact with his fans. Keith Urban's ongoing appeal was demonstrated by the enthusiastic atmospheres that drew thousands of people to each performance. After going through a lot, Keith Urban decided to use music to confront his own suffering rather than run away from it. During this time, Keith also publicly shared pictures of his wife and kids on social media, including simple, heartfelt moments like a Christmas family shot with the caption, "Our family to you." He mentioned this in an interview with an American songwriter. God bless you. The impact of Keith Urban goes beyond accolades and numbers, into the actual community. On social media, several fans candidly discussed how Keith's songs, particularly Break the Chain and the compositions from High, got them through difficult times. Following Keith's public sharing of his experiences in international media and social networks, a plethora of recovery support campaigns and addiction stories went viral. According to MusiCare statistics, recovery program participation has significantly increased after Keith Urban performances, especially at major shows in North America and Australia. Behind the scenes on tour, Keith Urban's colleagues and crew hold him in high regard for his candor and willingness to hear the issues raised by young artists, band members, and technical personnel. Band members claim that Keith frequently spends time after performances visiting with fans who are dealing with addiction or mental health concerns, genuinely listening to them and offering encouragement to each one of them. Additionally, he works with his wife Nicole Kidman to arrange private talks for young people about mental health, using their own experiences to encourage others to get assistance and persevere. Keith Urban's family is at the center of every transition in his life. Even with a hectic tour schedule, he makes time for his wife and 2 daughters by going on walks in the park, taking guitar lessons, or getting together after each show. Keith views his family as the most significant source of support that keeps him motivated to heal and continue his commitment to music, in addition to being a place to return to. Keith Urban exemplifies the tenacity of an artist who transcends the stage lights to genuinely influence real life with messages of honesty. He has plans to release new music projects and talk more about his story overcoming adversity in community talks. Acknowledging the past, getting back up, and actively influencing the future. Outside of the stage, Keith Urban encourages thousands of fans to share their tales of overcoming addiction and supports initiatives like Music Cares in order to spread the spirit of recovery. A strong wave of positive will to live was sparked by the several admirers who publicly expressed gratitude and shared their own recovery stories after the event. In addition to being a vocation, Keith Urban views music as a means of healing psychological scars, a defense of past transgressions, and an apology to his family. His relationship with Nicole Kidman and their kids is strengthened by the force of art, which also confirms his ability to conquer any obstacle. Under the spotlight, Keith Urban is not just a well-known country music artist, but also a representation of rebirth and a striking example of the will to overcome adversity. Please share your tale in the comment section below if, like Keith Urban, you have ever felt lost or found yourself at a crossroads. Remember to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss future updates about international celebrity strength music and backstage lives. If you think that every tragedy can serve as motivation, please hit like and share this video.